This last great day should also give us great hope. Because just as we come every year after the Feast of Tabernacles to the last great day, so we are going to come to fulfillment of what God has in mind. It will come just as surely as the feast goes by and we come to the end of the last great day. So it will happen. So it will happen that Christ will return. The kingdom of God will be set up. And then we will come to the last great day. This holy day is a challenge to us. It's a challenge sometimes to look ahead and not get confused by the darkness which is covering the face of this earth. And to look forward to the hope, to actively wait. To actively wait. To be profitable servants as we wait for our Master to return, who will return unlike Godot. What is God's purpose? What is God's purpose? Why? What are we involved in the Church of God? You and I, in this active waiting. If you turn with me to John 3:16, you all know this. Read this in New King James Version. John 3:16, what is God's purpose? What is God's purpose? And as we rehearse this on the last great day, for surely this is the message of the last great day, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. Today is not the only day of salvation. I think you all know that. We have a day of salvation right now. Let's go to Isaiah 49 and verse 8. I want to read this one in the Contemporary English Bible. Sometimes the contemporary translations are really good for bringing something out. When we get, if we read the KJV or the New King James or something like that, sometimes our minds get a little fogged. We just run over it without really thinking about the words. We need to think about the words and what it means, really. Isaiah 49 and verse 8, again, the CEB. The Lord said, at the right time, I answered you. God did that for every one of you. At the right time, God called you and opened your minds to his truth. When you could respond. I answered you. On a day of salvation, I helped you. I have guarded you and given you as a covenant, a promise to the people to restore the land. This year is my 39th Feast of Tabernacles. It was in the early part of August that I was baptized back in 1973. I was baptized in Jerusalem. At that point in time, the church had stationed there a minister of God. But to get to Jerusalem was not easy for me. I had been going to school in Switzerland. I'd been studying French, a lot of French philosophy, including waiting for Godot. It was on the literature list, which is kind of funny. It should be brought up. During the summer, however, in that particular school, we had people from all over Europe and actually all over a lot of different parts of the world at that university in Neuchâtel, Switzerland. And we were invited by a Hungarian girl to come east. These were the days when east of Austria was the Iron Curtain, where communism at the end of World War II had put its hand and the Russians had settled in on there and had a grip on those countries. When we left Austria we were going first to Budapest to meet our friend. We got at the border post, and you had to go down these, just sort of a ditch, so you couldn't just run your car straight up to it. We were driving our vehicle, which was a beat-up old $500 VW van that we didn't have even the legal papers to. We'd bought it from a bunch of Canadian hippies at a ski station, and they'd used it for smuggling drugs into Europe. Interesting, but we didn't have much money, you know, and I was 21, and you know how it is. We bought it. We needed a way to get around. So we got there, and you know, there we were. We presented our papers, and we had bought our visas in Paris, and we had all this, and we showed up, and they stamped our passports, and we could go in, but the battery was dead. It had been dead, actually, all from France, and we hadn't had a chance to replace it. So it was my turn to push. It was my roommate Weitch's turn to drive, and he'd pop the clutch. You know, you put it in the second, pop the clutch. And when I was pushing it, and it was hard, you know, asked some of the guards who were standing there with their submachine guns, come and give us a hand so we could push this thing, because it's flat, you know. Usually we tried to park on a hill for obvious reasons. And I got a couple of guards, and we push. He popped the clutch, and it backfired. You know how a car backfires. And the guys up in the towers with the machine guns swung them off right down at us. You know, dum 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 dum. Welcome to the Iron Curtain. Welcome to the land of darkness. I don't know how many of you have traveled through a land of darkness like that, where there aren't such things as individual rights and personal freedoms and a rule of law. I have. We spent a couple weeks there with our friend. It was very interesting. She had a boyfriend, and his family had not been in favor of the communist rule, and we saw how they lived. And the friend who invited us, who met us in Switzerland, her family were high up in the Communist Party. We saw how they lived. Very different. Extremely different. When we left, our friend that we stayed with, his family were not favored by the communists, he said, "Oh, would you take this to my brother who slipped out of the country in '68 when there was all this ferment, and he'd like to have this box of books," and they were all in Hungarian. We said, "Sure, we'll do you a little favor." We threw them in the back. We didn't know. We got to the border between Hungary and communist Hungary and communist Romania. There was a nice dictator there, Ceausescu, if you remember him, anybody who knows their history. And we got there around midnight, just as our visas were expiring, and we had to get out of the country. And the guard, they started searching our van. They came across this box of books. The guy hopped out of the car literally and started blowing his whistle, and all these guys with guns started piling out of the barracks that were nearby. And I looked at my roommate and said, "We are had." We spent from midnight to the break of dawn in the interrogation room. The guys, you know, with the hobnail boots and the single light coming down. Think it's out of a movie, but it's not. It's real. And the guy's typing up the charges against us. You know, he's one of these really great guys. 6 hours. we went through this asking questions. Whether, you know, meanwhile, in the next room, people are making calls. What are we doing with these guys? At dawn, sergeant came, armed, guard, and they marched us back into Hungary proper, on foot. And we went to the nearest building. When they opened the doors, we went in, and there's this guy at this high bench with a black robe, and then there are all these people standing there who looked like they had literally been drug out of bed, unshaved, looking there, just disheveled and all this sort of stuff. I'm serious. Their hair wasn't even combed. They'd been dragged out of bed because they were the witnesses. And we had a trial in Hungarian. I hadn't a clue what was being said. And we were the object. And we were found guilty. We were found guilty. And they said, you have to sign this confession of guilt. I said, what does this mean? What's going to happen to us? What's the penalty? Sign this. You have to sign this. We didn't have a clue. American embassy, Canadian embassy, anyway, not a clue. We didn't have a, we were had. My roommate and I looked at each other and said, well, there's one way to do this. We can't read this, so they probably won't read this either. So he signed Mickey Mouse and I signed Donald Duck. And we confessed. I'm not joking. I'm serious. And they then marched us back to our van, and they pointed out the books. And they had all these Hungarian books. They were socialistic, but not a communist version there in Hungarian. And then they had my two Bibles, my New American Standard Version and my Louis II French Bible. And they were confiscating them because they were all subversive literature. There was a colonel there and his translator, a woman who looked like she should have shaved a few years ago. I'm not joking about that either. And the sun's coming up, it starts starting to get a little, and the horizon's coming up, morning light. It's been all night. And I pushed between them because I saw my Bibles there, and I said, for all the things we've been through, there's one thing I'm not leaving behind. I don't care what it is. I said, these are mine, and I grabbed them. I forced my way between them and said, I looked them in the eye, these are mine. The others you can have, but these are mine. We left. And it was hard getting out of there because they confiscated all our money. And there we are in Romania trying to figure out what in the world we're going to do. How is this going to be? I mean, they took all our Hungarian money that we had left, so we didn't have anything to change. We had a few little other bucks and a little of this and a little of that, and some French coins and stuff. We were hungry, after all that night, and we were shaky. We looked for this place. We rolled into the first little village we came to on the Romanian side of the border, looking for something to eat. And this place looked like a set out of World War II, with still the bullet marks on the walls and the blown up buildings and all this sort of stuff. It said, no signs, no neon, no nothing. Where do we eat? Where do we find something to eat? We're hungry. And we just watched, and we watched people. You clue in pretty fast in the land of darkness. And I watched where all of a sudden we saw a line. We got in the line because we figured these people, something about food, must be food in this place. Nothing else was going on. People have to eat. These people have to eat too. All these people, you look at all the people, the faces, the sad, sad faces, the dreary faces, no joy in the eyes. No joy in the faces, just another day in the people's paradise of Romania. And we finally got up where they were serving food. Breakfast was big metal pail, those old milk pails, remember those? And it had yogurt in it. They had 1 cup for the village, 1 glass cup. They had a bowl with water. So you go up, and people would get their cup of yogurt milk, this is breakfast, then they dip it in the water, then dip it in the yogurt and give it to the next person in line. And we watched this. And we came up, we're foreigners, of course. I held out my hand with a couple coins, and the guy took some coins from me. Dipped the yogurt, gave it, rinsed it, dipped it, gave it to my traveling companion, my roommate, Weich, and we split. And we drove. Said, we want out of this place. We want out of this place in the worst way. And it took us a couple of days to get through Romania and into Bulgaria. But when we crossed into Hungary, I just literally kissed Turkey. I literally kissed that Turkey guy who said, "Welcome to the free land of Turkey, the Republic of Turkey." And I said, "You bet." We were so happy to get out of the land of shadow. But you see, when I was sitting there in the interrogation room, I was praying because God had been calling me. And I said, "Lord, bring me to Jerusalem. I want to be baptized. I want to be baptized." I'd been changing my life. I didn't grow up in the church of God. But I'd come across it, a lot of it because of my brother. God brought me through that. We found out later we could have easily spent 7 years in a slave labor camp because we had been enemies of the people for having subversive literature, both the Hungarian socialist stuff and the Bible. I could have spent 7 years. Instead, God did bring me to those golden streets of Jerusalem. And when the minister saw me and showed up, it wasn't a question of whether I baptized this guy. He came and said, "I have something to tell you. You must count the cost, because you will experience false brethren betraying you." And I'm sitting and sure enough, in the last 39 years, there have been at least 4 big betrayals. At least 4 big ones. When I came into the Church of God, when I came back to the United States, it's late September. I attended church for my first time in North America, and the feast was coming on, and somebody said, "Are you going to the feast?" I said, "Feast? Tell me about it." I want to hear about the feast. And he said, "Well, we go to the Feast of Tabernacles over here," and he explained all the thing. We listened to him, and it says, "I've got $50. That's all I've got. I came home, I checked my bank account. I came home with about $10, and I had about another 40. And the fellow said, "Come with me. It's not a problem. I'll take care of you." He lived in a trailer. He was hardly well off himself necessarily, but he took care of me. And I went up to the feast and enjoyed the Feast of Tabernacles and my first last great day. At the right time, I've answered you. On a day of salvation, I helped you. I have guarded you, yes, and given you as a covenant to the people to restore the land. In Paul's day, of course, he quoted something very similar. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 1. We're saved for a purpose, to establish God's covenant with others. Because you see, when I came back into North America, I was accepted to Ambassador College to be taught God's way of life. And God thought that was more important than for me breaking rocks in a slave labor camp someplace in the outer reaches of Hungary, of communist Hungary. 2 Corinthians 6, verse 1. As God's partners, we beg you not to accept this marvelous of God's kindness and then ignore it. No, when we experience God's kindness, and I experience God's deliverance in a remarkable way, can't ignore it. For God says, at just the right time, I heard you. Yeah, when you are in deep doo-doo, in the middle of the land of darkness, and the power of the enemy is all about you, that's when your prayers are really earnest, brethren, because you are in big trouble, and there's no one who's going to bail you out except God. The righteous right time I heard you. On a day of salvation I helped you. And the right time is now. Today is the day of salvation. We live in such a way, because of this, of course, Paul's saying in verse 3, we live in such a way that no one will stumble because of us, and no one will find fault with our ministry. Over the course of the years, when I've had problems with false brethren, it's because They didn't like that I was zealous in what I was trying to. I actually believed it. See, I actually believed it. I actually wanted to promote it. I wanted to preach the gospel. I wanted to do as much as I could. And I discovered that some people, that wasn't the most important thing. They wanted to take care of themselves. And there was always a certain amount of jealousy. We are saved for a purpose, and that's to minister to the needs of others, as others have ministered to our needs. That's why on this message here on the last great day, that is really the message for everyone sitting in this room. We have this cloud of witnesses from Hebrews 11, from Abel all the way up to the time that was written. Their examples of faith and courage should inspire us and should motivate us despite whatever difficulties we face in life. And, we all have difficulties. And if you don't have any difficulties, just wait. You will have some. That's the way life goes in this world and at this time. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 12. Hebrews 12:12. Well, actually 12:1. Here's what we need to do while we are actively waiting. So let's also run the race that is laid out in front of us, since we have such a great cloud of witnesses surrounding us. Let us throw off any extra baggage. Get rid of the sin that trips us up. And we all have those things that we have to be careful of. Each one of us. They may be different. They vary from individual to individual. But whatever they are, you know them. Get rid of the sin that trips us up and fix our eyes on Jesus, faith's pioneer and perfecter. He endured the cross, ignoring the shame. You know, how shameful was it when the Romans executed you by crucifixion? Most of the paintings you see, you see this little cloth around him. No, he was naked as the day he came out of his mother's womb. Totally naked. Beaten to a pulp, spit on, humiliated. For the sake of the joy that was laid out in front of him, and sat down at the right side of God's throne. We have Jesus' witness for sure. But we have all those others, normal men and women of Hebrews 11. Today, we are witnesses. We're becoming witnesses just as they were. In that cloud, we will be there in the future. That, we could, in the book of, Acts, we are writing still the book of Acts. It's not done. Salvation history is not done, brethren. We are in the process of continuing to write it. We are continuing the book of Acts, and it will be written at some point in time in the future of what has gone on since. We're looking forward to this future day of salvation that is coming during the Christ's millennial reign for sure. We have Isaiah. Let's go to Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 59. Let's go to verse 20. As I looked forward, very much forward to going to Jerusalem, to see those streets of gold at that time. Oh, I can't tell you how much I looked forward to that. It was that hope and that faith and that prayer that I fully believe that sprung me out of the hands of the communist governments over there. Isaiah 59, verse 20. The Redeemer will come to Jerusalem to buy back those in Israel who have returned from their sins, says the Lord. He's come to Jerusalem to buy them back because they had been sold to the devil for their sins. Verse 21, and this is my covenant with them, says the Lord. My spirit will not leave them, neither will these words that I have given you. And for sure, those words haven't left us. It's about 110 generations since Isaiah penned those words. And we still are reading them. My spirit will not leave them, neither will these words that I have given you. They will be on your lips and on the lips of your children and on your children's children forever. I, the Lord, have spoken. And here in Isaiah 61 it says, "Arise, Jerusalem. Arise, you people of God. Let your light shine for all to see. All you witnesses of my people, of the heavenly Jerusalem that we have our citizenship in. For that is a city that we have longed to be a part of. Arise, Jerusalem, let your light shine for all to see, for the glory of the Lord rises to shine on you." It will shine on each one of us, this glory of the Lord. Just like it was on the temple, the Shekinah of God, the glory of God, it will shine on each of us. Verse 2, "Darkness as black as the night covers all the nations of the earth." And sometimes what I experienced, what I saw, because the change was so dramatic when we left Austria to go into Hungary, it was just startling. And it was even deeper in the pit to go from Hungary into Romania. Deeper into the darkness. It was amazing. Darkness as black as night covers all the nations of the earth, but the glory of the Lord rises and appears over you. All nations will come to your light. Mighty kings will come to see your radiance. They're coming to see you. They're coming to see you who have overcome, you who've chosen the heavenly Jerusalem as opposed to the kingdoms and the values of this world of darkness. What are those who have died and never truly known God as their Father, whether Israelite or Gentile? Will God fulfill his promise? Will he fulfill the goal that he enunciated there in John 3:16, 17? Will he do this? What do you think? Will he say it and will he not do it? Will God yet fulfill this promise? How is it going to happen? How is it going to come to pass? Let's go to Romans. Romans chapter 11. Romans chapter 11. Apostle Paul writes this, and I'll read this in the New Living Translation. Romans 11 and verse 25. "I want you to understand this mystery, dear brothers and sisters, so that you will not feel proud about yourselves. Some of the people of Israel have hard hearts, but this will last only until the full number of Gentiles come to Christ. And so all Israel will be saved, as the scriptures say. The one who rescues them will come from Jerusalem. He will turn Israel away from ungodliness. And this is my covenant with them, that I will take away their sins." So this hardness of heart will last only until the full number of Gentiles come to Christ. You know, at the time that I was experiencing my last betrayal by false brethren, we were getting an interesting response that was going on to the Church of God in Nanaimo website that my sons had created. We were getting some interesting inquiries from somebody in Africa, a man named John Barta, who was a Sunday preacher, Sunday minister, teaching in a congregation. But he was interested in what he was hearing on the website. He was interested in the messages that were posted on the website, and he started asking us about the Sabbath. And my son, whom I had with my wife, who I met at Ambassador College the first day I showed up, who I would not have met if I had spent that time in a slave labor camp in Romania, in Hungary. But he started responding to what he was being told, and he decided, yeah, I'll keep the Sabbath. Even though it eventually got him turfed out of his church, and some of his people, went with him. And they're keeping the feast, as more or many than we have in this room. See, it's really hard right now for Canadians and Americans to come to Christ. It's hard because their hearts are so hard. We think we have everything. We don't understand the darkness that we live in here. It's just a different version of the darkness that they were experiencing under communism. But it does the same thing in beating down and destroying people. It's just a different style. Satan has his styles of doing in his ways of doing things. So when will all be saved? When will this hardness of hearts stop among our people, among whom we live? Let's go to Ezekiel 37. Ezekiel 37, and I'll read this one in the New Living Translation. Ezekiel 37, verse 1. The Lord, that is Yahweh, the one who later became Jesus, took hold of me, and I was carried away by the Spirit of the Lord to a valley filled with bones. He led me all around among the bones that covered the valley floor, and they were scattered everywhere across the ground and were completely dried out. Have you ever smelled a whole room full of old bones, brethren? You know, because of my interest in archaeology, I've been in all sorts of tombs. Ancient tombs. Tombs thousands of years old, full of old bones, and let me tell you, they have a very unique smell. Old bony smell. Bones thousands of years old, dried up, but they have this indescribable, peculiar smell. Old bones. Then he asked me, Son of man, can these bones become living people again? O sovereign Lord, I replied, you alone know that answer. Then he said to me, Son of man, these bones represent the people of Israel. They are saying, we have become old, dry bones. All hope is gone. Our nation is finished. Therefore prophesy to them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says, O my people, I will open your graves of exile. And yes, the children of Israel are exiled all over the Eurasian steppes, all over Europe, all over the British Isles, and all over varieties of other places in the faces of this earth, including North America. I will open your graves of exile and cause you to rise again. Then I'll bring you back to the land of Israel. When this happens, O my people, you will know. When this happens, you will know that I am the Lord. I will put my spirit in you, and you will live again, and return home to your own land. And you'll seek those golden streets of Jerusalem. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken, and I have done what I said. Yes, the Lord has spoken. It will come to pass because of the one who promised. Whether you or I remain faithful is irrelevant to the point as far as what God is going to do by himself. He has sworn he will fulfill his covenant. He will keep his promises. Now, when is this future time when the dead will be returned to life? When the bones, you know, as it says, Ezekiel 37's come together and all this happens? Let's go to Revelation 20. Revelation 20, verse 11. I'll stay with the conventional one here, the New King James Version here. Revelation 20, verse 11. Revelation 20, verse 11. Then I saw a great white throne and him who sat on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and there was found no place for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books. Contrary to what Protestant theology is teaching. Because they don't really believe this. There is darkness that is throughout the world right now. The dead were judged according to their works by the things that were written in the books. The sea gave up the dead who were in them, and death and Hades delivered up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one according to his works. Now, knowing these things, God has really two questions for us today who are sitting here. There are two questions. that you're going to have to answer. You're going to have to answer and say to yourself and look into your heart, into your innermost being and say, will I be there to teach the others who will be resurrected to physical life at the time of what Jesus says here, both in Revelation 20 and in Ezekiel 37, the time of this white throne period judgment? Will we be there? Or will something distract us? Will the stony ground, will the cares of this world, all the weeds, all the things, what will keep us from being there? What will keep you? What will keep me? We have to think about this. Will anything keep us? Let's go to Revelation 3:11. Jesus is very, very clear with what he's saying here. Revelation 3:11, he says, I am coming quickly. Hold on to what you have so that no one takes your crown. Do not let any other human being, any man, church authority, or whatever it might be, or any other human being, whoever it might be, that causes you to want to give up, turn your back on God, to compromise, to sell out. Hold on to what you have so that no one takes your crown. The victor, I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my God, and he will never go out again. When I read these verses now, and this is in the Holman Christian Standard Bible, the victor, I will make him a pillar in the sanctuary of my God, and he will never go out again. For somebody who's had to go out of a variety of church organizations or been forced out, it means something to me. I understand what this means now. Far more than I ever would have understood at the beginning of my walk, when I was told that I will have to warn, when I was warned in advance that I will come across false brethren. And I must not allow myself to be destroyed. I must not allow myself to compromise. I kind of wonder what inspired the minister to say that, because I don't think that's standard baptismal counseling. I will write on him the name of my God and the city, and the name of the city of my God, Jerusalem, the New Jerusalem. Right? They can put it right here on me. If the beast is going to have his on the hand and the forehead, God can put his on my hand and forehead. I'll take his. For sure. The New Jerusalem, which comes down of heaven from my God, and my new name. My new name. Let's go to Revelation 3:21. 3:21. See, now here, I'm being non-sectarian. See, I first quoted from the message of the Church of Philadelphia. Now I'm going to quote from the church at Laodicea. So you can't accuse me of playing favorites here on interpretation. Take your pick. Whichever you feel, applies, either or both, above, all the above. Revelation 3:21, New King James, to him who overcomes. Some versions will say conquer. To him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne. See, as his kings and as his priests, as his people, as Alex was telling us about earlier in 1 Peter. To sit with me on my throne, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne. See, and we have to overcome too. Christ set us the example for us. He went through hell and high water to set you and me an example that we can follow him. Just think, what is our responsibility to our neighbors, to our family members? Isn't it also to set that example as Christ set for us? We have that example. That's what we're to do. We're to overcome. Not let anything keep us from overcoming. And I will grant to him who overcomes, I will grant to sit with me on my throne. Now, what does the king do? We're told we're going to be kingly priests or kings and priests. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 17. Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse 18. I want to read this. Deuteronomy 17 and verse 18. I'm going to read this in the Message paraphrase by Eugene Peterson. Not Jim Peterson, Eugene Peterson. This is what must be done. Okay, this is for God's instruction in the original and in the Torah. Okay, and this is obviously written in Deuteronomy. This was repeated and for the people just before they went into the land, and God knew what was going to come to pass. He knew they were eventually going to have earthly kings. This is what must be done. When he sits down on the throne of his kingdom, the first thing he must do is make himself a copy of this revelation on a scroll. See, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy is revelation just as much as the book of Revelation. It's revelation. You make a copy of this revelation on a scroll, copied under the supervision of the priest, because the priests are to be faithful. The priest, you see, we must be doctrinally pure and faithful. That's required of a priest. That the scroll is to remain in his side at all times. He is to study it every day so that he may learn what it means to fear his God, living in reverent obedience before these rules and regulations by following them, because he has to set the example for the people. Everyone who's in his care. He must not become proud and arrogant. We've had too many who've sat in positions of stewardship in the church who've been proud and arrogant, and it's created problems. Changing the commands at whim to suit himself or make up his own versions. Yeah, we have lots of that. If he reads and learns, he will have a long reign as king in Israel, he and his sons. Of course, if he doesn't, then there are going to be problems. And God has a different way of dealing with everybody, according as suits him or as his sense of humor might so require, something, whatever it might be, that he's going to get his message apart to people. The role of a king is to be a father, to be a shepherd to his people, to lead them to God, just as David was a shepherd king over the nation. You read all those Psalms. Just go to Psalms 51. Psalms 51, verse 12. Psalms 51 and verse 12. Here in the Holman Christian Standard Bible, I'll read this one. Verse 12 says this: "Restore the joy of your salvation to me." See, don't take this way of life as just, it's boring, it's hard, and all this other stuff. Everybody thinks I'm a weirdo, whatever it might be. Or you're an enemy of the people because you believe this. Restore the joy of your salvation to me, and give me a willing spirit. Then I will teach the rebellious your ways, and sinners will return to you. Are there people who are in your life who are trusting you to set the right example? Who would be terribly disappointed when they come up at the White Throne Judgment period and you're not there? What happened? What happened to XYZ? Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, Joe, Billy. And you're not there. Because something got in your way. Somebody offended you. Something offended you. You wanted to hang on to your money. You wanted to hang on to your property when the only thing that you could do is go run and hide. Whatever it might be. Or you're going to insist to keep the Sabbath? $10,000 a day is your fine. Whatever it might be. You become an offender for even having the Word of God. When Jesus was crucified, why did he say to the Apostle John, "Behold your mother, behold your son"? Was because everything that Jesus owned in his family was confiscated by the Roman state as a condemned criminal who was crucified by the cross. They lost everything material. Everything. That's the whole family. That's the way the Romans did it. They were lucky they got away with their life, because in the old days, if somebody in your family offended, they killed not only you, if you were the offender, they killed all your brothers and sisters and children as well. They did it all. You know that? That's historically how they solved problems like that. And what we believe and what we live is far worse than being of a politically divergent form of socialism, let me tell you. When it comes time, when the rubber hits the road in the future, what we believe will not earn us lots of friends in high places. But are there people in your life who are trusting in you, parents and children and spouses and friends and coworkers? When you're facing next year's challenges and you're thinking, why in the world am I doing this? My life could be so much easier. I could do this. I could get this promotion. I could get this woman. I could get this man. Whatever it might be, think about that. What's it going to be like if you're not there? And they said, oh, so-and-so, old so-and-so crapped out. We have the casino next door, right? Good. I didn't see anybody say, and he said that means you guys haven't been going to the casino. That's good. Question 2, what will be the future impact of your good example right now? You know, this is an interesting question. What you do right now, how is that going to impact the people you're dealing with every day? Let's go to Matthew 25, verse 31. Matthew 25, verse 31. I want to read this in the Good News Translation. Matthew 25, verse 31. I'm not the first one who came up with the idea, by any means, that this passage is talking about the White Throne Judgment, because those giving the cup of water to the needy ones or whatever, that's not us. We're the ones who are receiving the cup of water. Or in my case, it was the cup of yogurt. You know, the village cup of yogurt. I got after the previous 50 people before me, and the people behind me would get the same cup. You know, some things you can't worry about. All right. When the Son of Man comes as king, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his royal throne. And the people of all the nations of this world, will be gathered before him. And then he will divide them into two groups, just as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. Because as many times as I saw in Israel and Jerusalem, they would run around the shepherds through the parks there, and you'd have the goats mixed in with the sheep. Goats usually out front. Verse 33, and he will put the righteous people at his right hand and the others on his left. And then the king will say to the people on the right, come, you that are blessed by my Father, come and possess the kingdom that has been prepared for you since the beginning of the creation of this world. I was hungry and you fed me. He could be speaking of you and me. You and I were hungry and thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you received me into your homes. I've been there. I've been the stranger who is hungry, who is thirsty, and even that guy who would give me something just because I wasn't of that village. He let me share, and they didn't have a lot to share. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you took care of me. In prison, and you visited me. That could be us. We're the ones who are naked. We're the ones who who are sick. We're the ones who are in prison. The righteous will then answer him, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we ever see you a stranger and welcome you into our homes, or naked and clothe you? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will reply, I tell you, when you did this for one of the least important of these followers of mine, you did it for me. You did it for me. Our example, do we make it easy for people to help us sometimes, come to our aid in some of these things? or when we're, at cross purposes with them for whatever reason, do we do it in such a way that later on they'll say, he told me what it was, I was wrong and all this stuff, and I hated his guts for it. But I understand it now. And they did it in a nice way. I appreciate what he did for me. He stood up. He said something. He stood up. He was willing to be counted. When I was in teachers' college, we'd get to, oftentimes it's conversation, we'd get around stuff, and we even approached, because as teachers have to talk about everything, talking about abortion and whatever, and I had to put everybody agrees with abortion, and I had to put it in my hand, No, I don't. I don't. And there I am, and there was one other woman. She was the wife of a missionary. And we were the only people in that entire class who didn't agree. And so you know what that does. When you have to be different. You always have to be different. Your kids have to be different. If they're going to be faithful, we're always going to be different. So what will our examples do? How about to our spouses? Paul gives a special exhortation for those who might have unbelieving mates. Is this your situation? Think about their future. This is something we need to think about. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 7. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 13. I'll read this in the New Living Translation. 1 Corinthians 7, verse 13. And if a Christian woman has a husband who is not a believer, and he is willing to continue living with her, she must not leave him. Verse 14, for the Christian wife brings holiness to her marriage, and the Christian husband brings holiness to his marriage. You see, it works either way. Otherwise, your children would not be holy, but now they're holy because obviously you're imparting and you're teaching what's right to them. God does, as he expresses in Malachi, the prophet Malachi, he's looking for holy seed, okay? He's looking for this training. You should be teaching and training your children on a day-by-day basis. It's not like what the atheists want. The atheists these days want you not to tell your kids, diddly squat, let them figure it out for themselves when they're a full adult. Yeah, well, good luck with that. Good luck with that, considering where this world is. Verse 16, don't you wives realize that your husbands might be saved because of you? And don't you husbands realize that your wives might be saved because of you? God isn't necessarily saving them right now. He may not be. All life can go by. And, yeah, she's nice. Yeah, he's nice, but, whatever it is. I like to golf, or I like to do this, or whatever it might be. And I'm not interested in really doing this. It is in the future, especially during this time of the White Throne Judgment, that they may be saved by your good example now. But if you have a bad example, what's that going to mean? If your example is bad, you mean Christians are like that? The first time I met people of the Church of God, when my brother was getting married and I was his best man. Now, as I said, I didn't grow up in the church. And at that point in time, to go to my brother's wedding, I actually cut my hair. So I got it up from halfway down my back up to my shoulders. I thought I was really making a concession here, for this bunch of weirdos, And so we went, and my mother had a little makeup on. And this was during the days in the Church of God where wearing makeup, you might as well have been putting out the red light. If you remember, any of those, if you remember that? So there we are at the wedding, and at the reception line, and I hold out my hand, and the Church of God people look at me, and they give me the dirtiest look you ever saw on your face. Hey, I wouldn't touch you. I might get something, just from shaking your hands. They looked at me like I am the total piece of dirt and crap that you ever seen in your life. It took me, I guess, another couple years to get over that first impression of the Church of God. And I had to go through hell and high water and sit in a room far from any help, under a light, under guard, in interrogation rooms, to realize that, yes, Lord, I'll even attend church with these people. I'll I'll even attend church with these people. I don't care how weird they are. Get me out of here. These nasty people who treated me like dirt. There all of that congregation, there was one person who treated me well. When I came back from the States, and after the following year, I was still working. I was pulling the night shift in a bakery, making some money before I could go out to Ambassador College, because I had been broke. They had a big split in the church in that year in '74. But there was one person who was a deacon. He actually shook my hand and took a little time to talk to me at that wedding. He stayed in God's church. The rest disappeared. Where are they now? I don't know. Many of those people, the false brethren, those who betrayed, whatever, many of them are dead. They're no longer around. I don't know I'm not their judge. What about your spouses? What does 1 Corinthians 7:13 say? God isn't, necessarily saving them right now. But in the future, is your example going to be a stumbling block or a blessing to them? I'm speaking religiously, a blessing, Will they think on you and say, wow, remember that? Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 3. 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 1. I'll read this in Peterson's The Message paraphrase. I call it a paraphrase because really it's more of what it is. 1 Peter 3 and verse 1. The same goes for you wives, Peter talking about this. Be good wives to your husbands, responsive to their needs. There are husbands who, indifferent as they are to the words about God, will be captivated by your life of holy beauty. What matters is not your outer appearances, the styling of your hair, the jewelry you wear, the cut of your clothes, but your inner disposition. Verse 4, cultivate inner beauty, the gentle, gracious kind that God delights in. The holy women of old were beautiful before God in that way and were good, loyal wives to their husbands. Sarah, for instance, taking care of Abraham, would address him as, my dear husband. You'll be true daughters of Sarah if you do the same, unanxious and unintimidated. Yes, sweetheart, I love you, but I'm going to church. Yes, sweetheart, I love you, but I am going up to the feast. Yes, sweetheart, I love you, but I'm really not going to cheat on my taxes or screw over my investors just to give you more money. I'm going to preserve my integrity. I don't care, that if all the neighbors have this and that, and I'm not going to do what's wrong to get it. The same goes for you husbands. Be good husbands to your wives, verse 7. Honor them, delight in them. As women, they lack some of your advantages. But in the new life of God's grace, we're your equals. Treat your wives then as equals so your prayers don't run aground. The same goes as for the example of those who are what we say maybe traditional Christians or worldly Christians, however we refer to the people. We're the minority report than those who are believe in the majority way of believing. We can't put stumbling blocks before them either, even as we dialogue and debate with them or run across them. And the same goes, of course, with their children. Think about it. Let's read something. I would maybe think about this. Who are the little ones of God? Who are the little ones of God? Matthew 18 and verse 6. This one I'll read in the Good News Translation. If anyone should cause one of these little ones to lose his faith in me, and we don't want to discourage anyone's faith, brethren. We don't. Some people are limited to maybe what God has revealed to them, but we don't want to discourage their faith. It would be better for that person to have a large millstone tied around his neck and be drowned in the sea, because God holds us responsible if we cause one of these little ones to lose faith. Could be our children, a mate, coworker, whatever it might be. if we're being hypocritical, if we're living hypocritically, we come to church and wear a church face and go home in our Attila the Hun, you're tying millstones around the necks of some of the little ones because they see right through it. They do. Hypocrisy is probably one of the most deadly things that a Church of God member can engage in, because it's going to hurt himself or herself, and it's going to hurt everyone around them. Because they, say one thing and they do another, really, in their hearts. It's always been one of the deadliest forms of sin in the Church of God. We are, and we should, set the right example. God's example of light, God's example of love in all that we do. Because not all the little ones, not all our children or all of our mates or our co-workers or family members are going to be called to salvation right now. Could be a much later time, that white throne judgment. And when they come up, what do we want them to say? Yeah, that's great. I'm glad to be here, and I will do it. I understand now. You made their way easy. Or will it be like, oh man, they're like, are they like this? It took God taking me into a hellhole in communist Eastern Europe for me to get over my thoughts and my feelings about the Church of God. And he'd say, yes, Lord, what you want, I will do. Whatever it is, I'm willing to do it, period. Unconditionally, yeah. Everything. I'll shave my head, stand on it. What do you want me to do? I'm willing to do it all. God holds us responsible. Let's go to Matthew 5:43. Read this in the New King James. Matthew 5:43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore you shall be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. Yes, while we're actively waiting, it's one of the things we can work on. Becoming perfect. Learning that although our enemies may not be called to salvation yet on God's time he may call them. After all, you think of the Apostle Paul. Where did he start out? He was there while Stephen was being stoned to death. He actually, he went along. He said he was even holding the guy's clothes who were, letting him have it with the stones. He hauled people into jail right and left. He treated them like dirt. Some of them were killed. Many of them were beat. And that yet the time came when, it wasn't in communist Eastern Europe, but it was in a personal encounter with Christ on the road to Damascus that he learned, oops, I got it wrong. And they got it right. Well, that's not so bad, is it? I know these people. I'll be just as nutty as they are now. I guess I got it wrong. That's not so bad. Also as people reject God today, the atheists and many who've never known God, as I said, family, neighbors, co-workers, fellow students, teachers, anyone in our circle of influence. We have a job to do in this act of waiting to set that right example for them, to make it easier for them. And for those we love, who may not hear at this time. Despite everything we do, it's up to God to call them. It's his sovereign choice of when he's going to do this. I'd love all my sons to be baptized. I've had the joy of having two, but I have two more. One who's still collaborating and one who's wandering. We can't let anything get in our way because we have to set the example so that when their time comes, it won't be a problem for them. 1 Peter 2 and verse 1. 1 Peter 2 and verse 1. Dear friends, I warn you, and as the New Living Translation puts it here that I'm reading from in 1 Peter 2, temporary residents and foreigners, or as, since he's no longer here, as Jim Patterson so fondly says, and I like that, pilgrims. You know, we are pilgrims. We're just passing through this society. You know, we're not here. This isn't where we're trying to end up. We have someplace else, the streets of gold and heavenly Jerusalem. I warn you as pilgrims to keep away from the worldly desires that war against your very souls. Be careful to live properly among your unbelieving neighbors. Then even if they accuse you of doing wrong, they will see your honorable behavior and will give honor to God when he judges the world. Yeah, this is a white throne judgment type of scripture. Our conduct today could make a life or death difference for somebody in the future. What we do today matters. Even if we don't think it matters, it'll matter. With those people who met me at my brother's wedding, the way they treated me, they didn't think of that at all, except for the one deacon who was actually converted, who said, he looked at me and realized, this guy's unconverted. Yeah, I mean, that's obvious. So are most people in this world right now. I wasn't trying to represent something I wasn't. So God's going to judge the world in that last great day. You know, we have a hope of God for all humanity, that he will fulfill what he said in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that the world might be saved, that the world might not just perish. He didn't come, he doesn't want to destroy everybody, or everything. It's not what he wants. Let's go to Revelation 21. Revelation 21 and verse 7. Revelation 21 verse 7. New Living Translation here. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared, and the sea was also gone. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, look, God's home is now among his people. He shall live with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them. Verse 4, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, or pain. All these things are gone forever. And the one sitting on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. And then he said to me, write this down, for what I tell you is trustworthy and true. We can count on it. In the most difficult situations you may find yourself this coming year, you can count on those promises, brethren. Be an overcomer. Don't give up. Verse 6, and he said, it is finished. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To all who are thirsty, I will give freely from the springs of the water of life. All who are victorious will inherit all these blessings, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. So that's coming. That's future. What does God want of us now? In 2012, going into 2013, how do we live with this future in mind? Paul gives us a good scripture to think about. Philippians, just turn to Philippians, and this is a closing scripture here. Philippians chapter 2 and verse 11, Good News Translation for this one. Philippians 2, chapter 11. Paul writes, all will openly proclaim that Jesus Christ is Lord. Yeah. It no longer will be what we have to do in arguing about, Jesus was the Lord who stood on top of Mount Sinai. He is the one that led the children of Israel through. He gave us this scripture, this revelation, this testimony as the blueprint for our lives. That Jesus Christ is Lord. All will proclaim that. To the glory of God the Father. So then, dear friends, as you have always obeyed, it is even more important that you obey now. Keep on working with fear and trembling to complete your salvation. Remember, judgment is now on us, not on the world, on us. Verse 13, because God is always at work in you to make you willing and able to obey his own purpose. And through all the path and the pilgrimage that I've gone through in this life, is because God has inspired me and kept me willing and able to obey his purpose. That despite of all the things and the stumbling blocks that I may have found, such that I've even have close friends say, man, how do you keep on? How do you keep doing this? So many have dropped to the right and to the left. How do you keep going? Because God is always at work in you to make you willing and able to obey his own purpose. Verse 14, Philippians 2, do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may be innocent and pure as God's perfect children, who live in a world of corrupt and sinful people. You must shine among them like stars lighting up the sky. Brethren, we must live like stars lighting up the sky. Remember, as you leave this Feast of Tabernacles and the last great day here in Penticton, that now is our time of salvation. And God has given us the work of active patience. The work of active patience, to live, to show the example for all those who are around us. It is our job to live in hope, to give others hope, by word, by action, by example, because God, we know, that is not calling all now. It's his choice. He's calling some in the future when their day of salvation, when he will call them and they will say, Lord, I'm ready. Help me, save me, deliver me. I'm pressed to the wall. I'm ready. That day will come for sure for those who it's not right now in the White Throne Judgment. And that's what this day is all about. Brethren, let's go forth for this feast. Don't be melancholy. We can all be a little melancholy, because we've been enjoying each other's company and presence and the words of exhortation. But let us have strength and be overcomers.